It is televised on Charter Government Channel 2, AT&T Uverse Government Channel 99, by live streaming on YouTube, or by joining us on Zoom. The link information is provided on the last page of the agenda. Flag salute. Cindy, would you lead the flag, have Cindy say the flag salute so we don't have echoes?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilor Authority Member District 2, Cindy Fossey.
Here.
Councilor Authority Member District 3, Cal Campbell.
Here.
Councilor Authority Member District 4, Darlene Barbara Martinez.
Here.
Vice Mayor Chair Luis Uribe.
Here.
Mayor Chair Richard D. O'Brien.
Here. Conflict of interest. Changes to the agenda, there will be none. Conflict of interest, any council authority member or staff who has direct conflict of interest on any scheduled agenda item to be considered is to declare their conflict at this time.
This is Councilmember Darlene Barbara Martinez. I have a conflict of interest with item 3E2.
And I have a conflict of interest on the same item 3E2, Crossroads Landscaping and Lighting District. Okay, presentations. Item 1.1, security camera update. Chief?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm going to give a presentation and an update on the camera system the city has installed. So let me go ahead and share my screen here so you can see that. Great. So to give everybody an update on our camera system, we've had it up now for quite a few months, and it's been working really well. But just kind of want to go back to the basics and kind of explain what exactly the system is and what it entails. So we have a total of 20 cameras. Out of those, there's 8 fixed overview cameras and 12 automatic license plate readers. Now, reminding everybody, this is a city-owned system, and our cameras are strategically placed around the city, covering our major intersections, our entrances and exits, to make sure we can follow up any kind of crime that happens in our community. We don't monitor the camera system on a daily basis. It's an additional tool using high tech to allow us to go back and look into the recent past to help solve crimes, and provides an added layer of security for our community. And it's helped us several times, and I'll go over those a little bit later in the presentation, exactly how that's happened. And one of the examples we could have used this for is back when we were having our bank robberies a while back, and they would have been a great tool for that as well. So our fixed cameras. So we have 8 total. And they're placed at a single location facing a single direction, and they provide high definition video that provides an overview of the intersection so we know what's going on. They can actually be reviewed remotely for us, and then we also can go back and pull up from, like I said, a recent past to see what's going on. It allows us to monitor traffic flow, congestion, vehicle accidents, crimes committed in that intersection. And like I mentioned, it provides a real look into the recent past, and that's only a maximum of up to 30 days that we can actually look into the past. And then we have our automatic license plate readers. There's a total of 12 of those. And we might ask, what is an ALPR? It basically captures image of a vehicle, and it transforms that the license plate is reading into an alphanumeric character using optical sensors, and then it takes that and runs it against known databases. We call them hot list. It gets information from the stolen vehicles list, missing persons, vehicles of interest, and then it can provide an alert. We can actually set up alerts based on to let us know stolen vehicles, missing persons, or it could be a vehicle of interest that we had involved in a recent case, and we want to know when the vehicle comes back in the town. Maybe it's a suspect in a burglary or somebody involved in a robbery. And it's pretty quick. I've actually tested this myself driving around town. I entered my work vehicle there to see how fast, and it reports an email within about 10 seconds of going through that intersection, so it's pretty impressive. So we ask about, what does it look like on our end? You know, what are we seeing? So I'm going to provide a couple examples here to show you exactly what that looks like. So this is the intersection here at Oakdale and Patterson, and that's an overview of the intersection, kind of showing you what we see in our end. And again, this is a screenshot from the remote view. When we play it back, it actually has even higher definition video that we're able to access. It's just when we download it directly, it's not as great, but you can see that's still a pretty good image. This is the same intersection that we use this system to capture a fatal DUI collision there earlier in the year, and they're actually able to capture that on 2 different cameras and use the video, which will be helpful in the prosecution of the person who ran the red light and created the fatal accident. Again, this video is purged in less than 30 days. So here we have the intersection of Clarabelle and Oakdale, and it kind of gives you the same viewpoint. This is this morning at that intersection. It kind of gives you an idea of what we can overview at this area. And again, these are fixed cameras. We don't have a way to manipulate them other than having them relocated by the camera company. So next we have a view from an ALPR. So it's a little different. It's a more narrow field of view. And this is actually the north-south of Oakdale at Clarabelle Road. Primary duty is to focus on reading license plates, and that's why you have the view that's zoomed in there, because its sole purpose is to read those license plate numbers and run them against the database. These cameras do have the ability for a pan, tilt, and zoom, and which is something that can be an added tool that we can use for proactive enforcement or even being reactive. So, for instance, this particular intersection is near the banks where we did have the robberies at one point. So if we thought we needed to provide extra security over that intersection or a particular business or where we're having a hot spot of crime, we can actually reposition this camera and set a new home point for it to monitor that area as well. This is another ALPR view. This is actually the First Street Bridge going across from Jacob Miles Park. And this camera actually works, one of the best cameras we have, and that's just based upon how narrow this road is, so we're able to capture both lanes of traffic. The camera's got to be zoomed in fairly close to get accurate reads of those plates. On the next slide here, this is basically the dashboard that we see. And every day we can look on here, and it has the plate numbers. They've all been whited out on here. But it shows you where the plate was read at, what direction it was looking, and it gives us the plate number. We have the ability to quickly hover over that plate number, and it shows us an actual photograph of the license plate it read. And then the computer provides what kind of vehicle it believes it to be. So like the top one says it believes it to be a silver gray Honda SUV. And I found it's probably in the high 90% accurate of using an algorithm and figuring out what kind of vehicle that is, which is another way for us to go back and say, for instance, we had a white compact sedan that's doing a burglary or something like that. It's the way to narrow down the field. And granted, there's probably going to be a lot of white sedans, but then you can go even further. We know the first character of the license plate starts with a 5, so we can add that. So it provides us a lot of useful tools to go back and solve crimes. This here is a graph that we have ability to kind of show the number of plates we're capturing, how many alerts we're receiving, and then it tells us the processing time in milliseconds for the computer to go and figure that out, and then plate confidence. So the plate confidence is pretty important for us too, because it kind of gives us a quick way to look at something to know that, this is in the high 90s. If we're getting a hit that's probably in the low 50s, either the plate's obstructed, it could be a lighting issue or something like that. Occasionally these things will read a patrol car driving around town, and it actually picks up the word sheriff on the door, and it'll tell you the license plate sheriff because it's looking for alphanumeric characters, which again can be helpful for us too, because if we're looking for a certain kind of Penske truck van, let's just say for instance, we can actually run that, and it may have got captured the word Penske on the side of the truck because it can actually read characters, which is pretty impressive. All right, so how has it helped us? We talked about the fatal collision we had earlier. That was one of the main things that helped us there. We did have a hit and run collision here just last month, and we had some conflicting stories on exactly how that happened. Luckily, we were able to go back and pull this video using the timestamps and replay the video and see exactly what did happen and what transpired, which helped investigate the crime and which led to an ultimate arrest in this hit and run. Burglaries. We had some burglaries occurring at our cruisers in town. It aided an investigation of that, and we located the vehicles involved. which helped our investigation. Didn't solve it, but it led us to that vehicle, and then it led us to the owner who sold it to somebody else and sold it to somebody else, and we ultimately solved that crime as well using the cameras. Oh, we'll go back one here. And then Modesto PD had a series of thefts going on in their city, and they wanted to know by chance if they were coming through our town. So in turn, we ran and we found this vehicle came through our city. It didn't belong to our city. They're actually Modesto residents, but that same vehicle went through our town numerous times. So that helped not only solve their crimes, but it also probably prevented further burglaries happening in our town because these folks aren't even from Riverbank and they were in our city, and we were able to show that they were in here certain times of the day when the burglaries were happening. And it ultimately, I think, in my opinion, stopped some thefts from happening or prevented future ones. We also had a missing persons. We had an elderly person that left their residence in our vehicle. We quickly ran the plate in there, and within about 10 minutes, we were able to locate this elderly lady and get her returned back to her family safely. And without the cameras, it would have took us a much longer time to find her. And so it was very helpful. It's a way to look at something. These aren't just for crimes. They're also for our public service for our community. So I ask, what's next? What do I see on the horizon for these cameras? Ability to move the cameras as need be, but we have some gaps on the east side of our town that we really need to fit in there, and it's just a matter of locating some city-owned property or poles to get that on, and we're actively working on that to get those in place, and I believe that'll help keep our town safe. We've had trouble along River Cove with people leaving trash there, public intoxication, public urination, and this has been going on for at least 10 years, and we've been doing our best with added security to take a grasp of that area. This is possibly another area we can look at adding cameras to that area to help aid in those investigations and hopefully let the community know that you are being monitored if you're doing illegal activity in those areas. The parks, their idea is sometime in the future is adding an overview camera to our parks. Again, these cameras aren't monitored every day. We don't sit around and just look at the cameras, but it gives us a place to go back and solve crimes. People need to know that they're safe in their parks with their families. They need to know that if something happens that, we have their back and we're going to solve the crimes. It also could serve as a safe exchange point in the parks as well. People buy things on social media, and if they need a place that they can go, they can know that this is a recorded area, so hopefully prevent any kind of theft from happening in that. And I think deploying some of these kind of cameras during our cheese and wine, and whether we keep them permanently or we get something that we can bring in portable during those events, it's a force multiplier. It basically allows one officer to monitor a few cameras versus having multiple officers out trying to view the same thing on the ground. So I think that it has some benefit there in the future. But all in all, we want to let the public know that these cameras are up. It's there to keep them safe. Cameras are pretty much part of the everyday of life now. You go in any kind of business, you're going to be recording on multiple cameras. You can see the cameras around town. They have the little blinky light on them and the white box, and it kind of shows people, hey, we're here, we're watching, hopefully prevent some crime. And they'll see multiple cameras mounted on one box, and another reason for that is we have at least 10 sites, but there's multiple cameras at those sites. Some are fixed error views, some are the LPRs featuring looking different directions. So that's why people may ask, well, why there's so many cameras on one pole. It's just because they're covering multiple areas. So with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I'm sure there might be a couple questions if anybody has any for me.
Vice Mayor Uribe here. I'll go first. Chief, you mentioned there were gaps on the east side of the city. How many cameras do you think were short on the east side there?
I think 2 cameras. I think we need to cover the northeast portion of our community and the southeast portion. We have some that are further out. We're not completely blind there, but at the outlying areas there, I think we need to get some moved in. Okay.
Could you go back about 4 slides, the one where it shows the alerts chart?
Yeah. Yes.
That one right there. You said you punched in your own vehicle and it kicked it back in about 10 seconds. Is that what we're seeing in that top middle one for the alerts?
It is. That's what you're seeing is the time frame for the alerts to come back and also how many. So we're getting a lot of alerts in. Some of them are stolen vehicles, some are missing persons, some are stolen license plates, and some are the list that we generate ourselves. Like I mentioned earlier, we have missing people, persons that we can add in there, or a vehicle of interest we can add in those as well.
Okay, so it seems like it's pretty consistent, and then you see the jump to 20. Was that 20 seconds then? So sometimes it's either a 10 or a 20 second delay there. Is that what we're seeing?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, this is Councilmember Darlene Barber Martinez. And I had a question about as technology changes or gets updated, and if there's any vandalization that happens on the cameras, who pays for that? Is that the city's responsibility, or just to the county, or who?
I probably have to let Sean speak to that.
Sure. So the agreement was established so that issues that come up, let's just take vandalism for an example, that's covered by the company and they will replace, obviously if there's an issue. With regard to new and improved technology, we've had a number of discussions with them that we would, if they feel like there's a better, newer model of camera that would be of value to us, that the agreement is flexible in that we can swap those out, for better technology, especially since we, have quite a few cameras that we're leasing from them. They also, at no additional charge to the city, will come out, and if the chief were to decide, hey, I don't really need this location, I'd like to move this camera over here, they come out and do the maintenance and the moving as part of the total cost, so no additional charge for that.
Thank you.
Chief, on the River Cove, let's say that we put cameras there and we saw some instances of individuals breaking the law. Can we use that as citing them, or do we have to have someone actually physically see them other than the camera?
If it's something that we can normally issue a citation that happens in our presence, we can definitely do that. If it's something that requires somebody to be a victim of a crime or provides arrest, we'd have to go that way. But I definitely think they'd be helpful. And one thing to note, if we added them in River Cove, I know there may be some concerns because the residents being right along the river too, these cameras have the ability to say certain areas we don't want to see. We can actually block those out as well.
Are there any additional cameras you would like to have other than the east side?
I mentioned the River Cove area, and then talking about covering our parks, our skate parks, areas just to make our community safer. If we have crimes that happen there, it gives us another tool to go back and review.
The other one, Chief, that Chief and I have been discussing is we're working on a proposal from this same firm for security cameras at our city facilities here downtown, the police department and city halls, because right now we have really old technology that doesn't work anymore. It's probably 20 years or more now. So we'll be bringing that forward for council to consider.
Well, we need more than just security cameras for making us secure. We need new buildings, but that's another thing. All right. Any other comments or questions? Cindy? Where did Cindy go? All right.
Shake my head. Sorry.
There you go.
No, I don't have any comments. I think it's a great system.
I think we did well when we chose it.
We did.
Okay.
Can I make just a quick statement real quick? Seeing as we're having issues at the River Cove, is that something that we could get cameras right away, or do we need to bring it back to council to get that approved again?
I think that depending on I think that with the authority that the increased budgetary authority that council granted me a couple months ago, 2 additional cameras is not that much of an increased cost to the contract that we have, and so I suspect that we could approve it at a staff level. I think what we may try to do, because the River Cove problems are really the worst in the summertime, and so what we might do with the company is do sort of a trial period where we test them out in those locations for maybe the remainder of the summer, which wouldn't be all that expensive. And if they're useful to the chief and to the police department, they help, then maybe we come back with sort of a permanent solution there. But in the meantime, we wanted to just test it out. So, and that's something that I think we could just do at a staff level.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. By the way, great job this weekend.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council LRA Board. Individual comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Under state law, matters presented during the public comment period cannot be discussed or acted upon. If you're joining us on Zoom, use the raise hand feature or *9 on your phone. Let's wait for a delay time of about 15 seconds. Annabelle, is there anyone wishing to speak to make any public comments?
There is no one wishing to speak at this moment, and I have not received any emails.
Okay. And we made that comment at the beginning of the session, so we'll move forward to the consent calendar. And if someone out in the public wishes to do a public comment and we have passed you, please join us and let us know. I will be happy to come back to it. Item 3, the consent calendar. At this time, anyone wishing to comment on the consent calendar items via email can send comments to the city clerk at riverbank.org. Item 3A, waive readings. Item 3B, approval of the May 12th, 2020 City Council Local Redevelopment Authority Board minutes. Item C3, a resolution calling and giving notice for the holding of the general municipal election to be held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. For the by-district election of Councilmember District 2, Councilmember District 4, and election of a mayor at large as required by the provisions of the laws of the state of California relating to general law cities. To request the Stanislaus County Board of Supervisors to permit the county elections official to render election services to the city and to request the consolidation of said election with the statewide general election held on the same day. There is no item 3D as we proceed. Item 3E, 3 resolutions for each of the following landscape and lighting districts. 1, initiate proceedings for the annual levy of assessment. 2, declare its intent to levy annual assessments. And 3, for preliminary approval of the annual levy report for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. Item 3E1, consolidated landscaping and lighting district. Item 3E2, Crossroads Landscape and Lighting District. Item 3E3, Ridgewood Place Landscaping and Lighting District. Item 3E4, River Cove Landscaping and Lighting District. Item 3E5, Sierra Vista Estates Landscaping and Lighting District. Item 3F, a resolution for each of the following storm drain maintenance district ordering the levy of collection of assessments for fiscal year 2020-2021. 3F1, Riverbank Storm Drain Maintenance District, number 2006-01, Heartland. Item 3F2, Riverbank Storm Drain Maintenance District, number 05-01, Sterling Ridge. We'll take all of these at one time with the exception of item 3E2. We'll discuss at the end of the consent calendar. Is there anyone wishing to discuss or pull any of the consent items? Annabelle, is there anyone wishing to speak on the consent calendar items?
There is no one wishing to speak on the consent items.
Are there any emails?
There are no emails.
All right. May I have a motion for the consent calendar as presented with the exception of item 3E2?
I'll make a motion we approve the consent calendar with the exception of 3E2.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by the Vice Mayor and a second by Councilmember Campbell. Roll call, please.
Council Authority members Barbara Martinez,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Fosse,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Chair Uribe,
Yes.
Mayor Chair O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Annabelle, for item 3E2, I'll be happy to step aside or then have Darlene do it since we can't draw lots.
I'm also have a conflict of interest with item 3E2. So can we get our vice mayor to do it?
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute. We have 3 people. We don't need any more than that, do we, Darlene? I mean,
That's correct. I could just call roll call on those that can vote.
okay, that makes sense to me. For item 3E2, do we have a motion to approve and a second on those who can vote?
Vice Mayor Uribe here. I'll make a motion on 3E2.
I second.
We have a motion by the vice mayor and a second by Councilmember Fosse on item 3E2.
Council Authority members Campbell,
Yes.
Fosse,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Chair Uribe.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Item 4, workshops. At this time, anyone wishing to comment on item 4.1 via email can send the item to cityclerk@riverbank.org. Item 4.1, fiscal year 2021 major fund budget workshop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Maricela Garcia is going to give this report this evening. This is a item that's designed to primarily give you sort of a sneak peek into what we think is going to happen next year. She's going to step you through expenditures, but most importantly is to have some discussion with council on what we're forecasting in terms of revenue loss, not only next fiscal year, but in the following. So I'll hand it over to Maricela.
So good evening, Mayor, City Council members. So tonight we are going to have a brief overview of what I consider our major funds. So why would I consider them a major fund for us to review today? These funds receive the majority of the city's revenues. They're typically discretionary based on the type of revenue that's received. They also provide major resources for the operations of the city. So the funds we're going to review today are going to be your general fund, your gas tax fund, and the sewer and water enterprise funds. So let's go over a little bit of the major revenue impacts that you're going to see throughout this discussion today. And they're all specifically related to COVID-19. The first being sales tax. Obviously, the closure of non-essential businesses has impacted significantly the projections that were made from our sales tax auditor. We're looking at a decrease this current fiscal year of approximately $200,000 to $300,000, with an additional decrease of approximately $500,000 in the upcoming fiscal year. Some of that is in lost revenue, and some of that is in the form of a sales tax payment deferral program that the state of California has authorized. So we'll see a bit of a cash flow delay when it comes to the payments that are received from sales tax from the state of California. Other revenue sources that we have that are specifically based off of our sales tax will also be impacted. And so those are specifically in relation to public safety. There's 2 funding sources that we have. Public safety augmentation, which is a dedicated half-cent sales tax, in addition to COPS funding that we receive. Measure L will also see an impact since it is also sales tax based, although we will not be reviewing that today. Kathleen brings forward the expenditure list for Measure L, and that is based on the recommendations and the projections made by StanCog. Now, gas tax will see a decrease in what we call the highways user tax. Those taxes are based on fuel cells. And so with the shelter at home order that was placed by the state of California, that obviously decreased our fuel sales. And so we'll see a decrease in revenue for our gas tax fund. Our gas tax fund primarily funds the maintenance of our streets, in addition to providing much needed project funding for street overlays. And we've been using a lot of the SB1 funds in order to fund crack seals and different projects for our streets department. Sewer and water revenues, the loss of the penalty fees that was authorized by the city council as a result of COVID-19 and the inability of some of our residents to be able to make their utility payments. So we did see this as a benefit to our residents to delay or not assess any penalties for 2 of our billing periods. So that was a loss of approximately $30,000 to $40,000 in total for the water and sewer funds. Major expenditure impacts for the upcoming fiscal year are primarily based around salary and benefits. We are currently in year number 3 of a negotiated labor contract with 2 of our bargaining units. So we do have a negotiated cost of living adjustment that all employees within those bargaining units will receive. In addition, we have our continued increase in the unfunded PERS liability. So for the upcoming fiscal year, we're seeing an increase of approximately 16% in unfunded PERS liabilities. The last item there is police services. So we have a natural increase due to their negotiated cost of living adjustments. In addition to the fact that this will be year number 1, that we will see 100% salary of our new deputy that we were able to acquire through the public benefit fund. So here is a brief overview of where I see our general fund in the upcoming fiscal year. So we'll start with approximately 32% reserve at almost $3.2 million. We're looking at revenues of about 9.9 with expenditures at almost $11 million. So the anticipated ending reserve at the end of the fiscal year will be approximately $2.5 million or 25%. Still well above the minimum established by the city council. You established a range of 13% to 15% in reserve holdings. So we are above that, but the area that we will need to continue to watch and that we will be watching within the next 3 months and that Sean and I will need to make recommendations for you is the closure of that structural deficit. The projected expenditures do not include any capital items. So that means this is all ongoing expenditures that we're seeing causing this deficit. Now, we will have the economy hopefully rebound, which will mean that we'll continue to see increases in revenues in the upcoming fiscal year in order to compensate for some of that deficit. But there are expenditures that we'll need to review and contracts as well, and make some recommendations on areas where we may be able to cut back a little this next fiscal year. So overall, here are your revenue and expense projections. You'll notice that we're actually only looking at a 1% decrease in revenues. We do have some new revenues coming in primarily from that public benefit fee in order to compensate for the increase in the sheriff's contract as a result of the new deputy. The second, our expenses, we're actually looking at a slight decrease of 3%. That's majorly with regards to the savings that we're looking at from the community center project that has now been placed on hold. So as I mentioned, the expenses are ongoing, and so we will not continue to see any decreases in the upcoming fiscal years. There is still 1 year left in the labor contracts that have been negotiated with the two groups, with one additional cost of living adjustment that they'll receive, continued increases in PERS expenses as well. So we will need to, as I mentioned before, Sean and I will be reviewing the budget very carefully. So when we return with the final budget, we will have some recommendations for council to consider. Our gas tax fund, we're looking at a decrease of 13% in revenue. So this is the decrease that I mentioned earlier with regards to our highways user tax. These projections were received by the state of California after the May revise made by the governor's office. They will then make a subsequent revise in August. They have already advised us of that there will be another revise in August for this upcoming fiscal year's budget. So we may see those revenues continue to fall for the city. Hopefully, as the shelter in place is lifted, and as well as some of the non-essential businesses beginning to open up, we're starting to see more people on the road, more people traveling, more people returning to work. And so hopefully those fuel costs or those fuel sales will increase as well and provide us additional revenue. The state of California does have also an inflationary amount that is being added to that gas tax that we receive. So the majority of some of that loss in revenue is being compensated by that inflationary amount that's being added. Expenditures, you're seeing a 33%. Don't let that fool you. That does include some significant streets and roads projects that are being funded through SB1. Kathleen and Public Works or Development Services, brings forward those projects to you. They're based off of revenues that have already been received. So we're not funding any projects that have not been already considered and approved by the City Council. With regards to our sewer fund, we are looking at a slight decrease of 2% for the upcoming fiscal year in revenues. That is due to the loss of what we may consider a loss of penalty fees. We also have lost one of our major industrial permit holders. That was Pacific Gold. And so you have a few closed session items specifically related to that and have had some in the past. So you know that they will not most likely be returning. So we have anticipated the loss of the revenue from that particular user. Expenditures will be going up by 22%. That is to fund the last of the capital projects that were to be funded through the increase in sewer rates that was approved 5 years ago. The water fund, we're looking at an increase in revenues of 2%, and that's extremely conservative. At this point in time, since we just started billing for consumption, we don't have really a good feel for what normal is going to be now that we're billing at consumption rate. We will be doing significant revision of the revenues at mid-year when we have almost a year's worth of data with regards to consumption from our customers, and then we'll be able to give you more accurate projections. So we just put in a slight increase as a placeholder at this point in time, and then we will be revising at mid-year with the new data received. Expenditures are also increasing at that same 2% rate. So what's next? So this is just a really brief overview of those major funds. On June 23rd, you're going to see what Sean and I are calling our preliminary budget. This is the recommendations based on the information that we have at hand. quarter one sales tax figures are going to be due to the state on July 31st, which means that our consultants will be immediately working on revised sales tax figures. Second quarter projections will be finalized based on the reopening of several of our sectors of the economy. And so once we receive those figures, we'll be able to update all of our projections, and then we will present to the City Council a final or revised budget to adopt in September, along with recommendations on expenditures. And that is all from me. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Questions from the council? Maricela, I have several since no one chimed in right now. It appears that CalPERS has lost a lot during this COVID. Have there been chatter about lowering the discount rate?
At this point in time, there has been no discussion at the board level or at staff level regarding changing the discount rate. Now, any losses that they suffer this fiscal year, we will see the ramifications of that in 2 fiscal years for us with regards to the impact to our rates.
And that will be reflected in when we're paying our unfunded liabilities in 2 years. So that could be significant.
Correct.
Okay. With some of the general fund, what is the general fund total? Excuse me, reserve? Dollar amount.
So currently, let me go back to that. We're estimating that we're going to be at about 3.15 at the end of the fiscal year. So it's about 32%. And for the upcoming year, we'll see that drop to 25 based on the current projections that we have for revenues and expenses.
Right. And can you give us, either tonight or later on, how much of that reserve was through the safety benefit fund or what we put in reserve for the cannabis?
So this does not include any public benefit fee. The public benefit fund is an entirely separate fund. You'll see different projections for that particular fund on June 23rd. It is not at all included in this beginning reserve.
You know, that's amazing that we're at this high when 2 years ago we were so low.
Yes, but unless we make some changes to the ongoing expenses that we have, or we have a significant bump in revenues, we're going to continue to see this structural deficit roll forward, and that will definitely eat into our reserves.
If you look at the staff report, the written staff report, the chart that's really telling is the estimated deficits over the next 5 years. And, even just this coming year at $664,000 in deficit, you lose essentially 6.5% of your reserve right there. And that's not even with projects or anything. I think I understand that what the mayor was trying to get at with regard to the public benefit question is, if the general fund had picked up the purchase of the cameras and the additional police officer and some of the other code enforcement, a couple other little things that are coming out of that. This is a bit table napkin math, but it would be approximately $225,000 to probably $250,000 added on to that 664 number if the general fund was paying for those costs. So essentially, your deficit would look more like 800 to 850 if the public benefit fund didn't exist.
And without doing capital improvements, my fear, we did this in 2011 through, 14, when we started coming back. Our projects cost much more to do than they would have in 2010 or 11. So, any other question from council? Okay, thank you, Maricela. I look forward to the final, actually the almost final budget. All of the reserves for our enterprise funds are still healthy, correct?
Yes. So with the resuming the consumption billing, we'll finally bring our water fund back into a healthy reserve level. That is the one that was suffering a structural deficit. And when I presented to you on June 23rd, you will see that structural deficit. But as I mentioned, in December, when we start to look at mid-year budget revise, we will make those revisions to the projections on revenue based on the experience of the consumption billing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Annabelle, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments or emails at this time.
This item has been for direction, which has been provided. And Maricela, as always, thank you. Great job on the budget. We continue on to public hearings. At this time, anyone wishing to comment on public hearing item 5.1 via email can send them to
Mayor.
Yes.
Apologies for interrupting, but I think you might have skipped item 4.2.
I got my pages mixed up and I can't view my.
Would you like me to go ahead and announce it?
Yes, please. Would you do that for me? I have a page missing in my script. Oh, wait a minute. I got it.
Okay.
Sorry. Item 4.2, workshop law enforcement services agreement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
I have to make an announcement. I did not. At this time, anyone wishing to comment on item 4.2 via email can send them to cityclerk@riverbank.org. My apologies.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. So this is an item that I'm just going to give you. I wanted to provide this in advance of any vote on a contract because sometimes, these are all important decisions, and I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback before you're put in a position to have to vote on something that's a multi-year agreement. So I just thought we'd sort of step through a little bit of the history, explain what's different in this current agreement, and then answer any questions. Here's just a brief history. The Riverbank initially started contracting for police services in 1995. And since that time, the Stanislaus County Sheriff has provided staff for Riverbank Police Services and have provided all of the traditional law enforcement functions that you receive in an internal department. In addition to that, one of the added values of having a sheriff's contract is you get all of these additive services that most departments, and certainly departments of the size that Riverbank would not be able to afford, like SWAT, hostage negotiations, bomb team, K9, special vehicle operations unit, and the mounted unit. In June of 2015, the City Council approved the current contract that we're under, which had a term of June of 15 through the end of this month. And then over the past 5 months, I've been negotiating an updated law enforcement services contract with the sheriff's management team along with Houston, Waterford, and Patterson. We sort of banded together to have those discussions. The terms for the updated contract are actually very similar. The document is really pretty finely honed at this point over many, many years, but we did make a couple changes, and I'll get to some of those. But the basics are we cover the actual cost of personnel, equipment, etc. The term of the contract will be a little shorter this time because we want to be on a more normal 4-year period where we're in line with the other contract cities, so that when everybody's contracts come up, we're negotiating as one, which gives it's a lot more efficient and also gives us a little bit more bargaining power. Key issues that we discussed are things that council has provided feedback on in the past. Primarily the frustration, I think, in receiving when we are able to afford to add on deputies, how long that process takes. And we spoke with the sheriff about that quite a bit, and he's you probably recall that he has an analogy that it's like kind of like ordering a Tesla. You sort of have to put the order in, and then eventually it's filled. There are some good reasons for why the process takes a long time, and we can get into that. But we also have been looking into some other creative ideas about additional staffing, specifically related to community resource officer, which we can discuss more later. Another one is control of costs. Obviously, the greatest risk to contracting for a service like law enforcement, especially when we do not have a seat at the bargaining table, in a sense, when the Stanislaus Sheriff's Union is negotiating their updated employment contracts, the county, negotiates those for everyone. And so there is some level of concern sometimes that, if a very generous contract was agreed to, that, we would sort of have to eat that cost, which is true. Although I will point out that to the county's credit, they have in this last period, council will recall that they negotiated a deputy 2 salary range, and they actually split that cost with the city. So they essentially subsidized that for I think a budget year to get us ready for that full burden, and it's worked. The attrition rate seems to have dropped. We are actually recruiting officers that had left, and my understanding is they're now coming back to work in Stanislaus County, which is great. And so thus far that's been successful. And then just general operational administrative matters, how you handle issues that come up with it within the contract. And at this point, we have a pretty good system, and the command staff, the chief and above, have been very responsive whenever there's an issue that we need addressed. Here is, it might be kind of tough to see and with the video on top of it, but this is a general estimated budget of what we will probably be looking at over the course of this contract. So you see that the total cost of city contracts is estimated at just under $4.3 million in this coming fiscal year, and that will raise to roughly $4.69 million by 2024. That does not, I have to go back and check. I don't know when the current agreement expires with the Stanislaus Sheriff's Employment Association, but if there are changes to compensation, these numbers will tweak a little. This also does not assume an additional position or two. Obviously, if those are included, you would see increases to salary and benefits, a little to overtime, transportation costs, vehicle replacement costs, etc. The two key changes that are in this contract that I want to just highlight are one, staffing shortages. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I put it out there because I wanted members of the public to see it. But essentially what this provision says is that in the event, well, let me start by saying this is not a problem today because the sheriffs, for the first time in a long time, are fully staffed at the home office. But that was not the case even as recently as like a year and a half ago. And one of the concerns that the county had was that when they went through these extreme staffing shortages, they were contractually obligated to give us, however many officers we have contracted for, and they couldn't pull those folks out of town technically. And that ended up becoming a bit of an issue because sometimes they have like extreme staffing shortages. Maybe you have a bunch of people out sick, maybe a bunch of people leave to go take other jobs, and so you run into issues. And they wanted to include some language that allowed a little bit of flexibility so that they run into that problem. We will be able to, they can meet with us and discuss how we could share in some of that officer's deputies' time, and we could maybe send them some staff to help in the short term. And then obviously they will pay for that amount of time that we are helping them out, essentially. And the door does sort of swing both ways, because keep in mind that if we ended up in a situation where, a couple of our staff maybe go out on leave and we have the benefit of being able to pull from the larger sheriff deputies pool, and they will bring in and backfill those positions for us. So that's one. And from my perspective, I think it's a reasonable request, and we try as a matter of practice to help them out when they ask, even before this language was included. The second one is one that's, I'm not sure how I feel about it. You will recall that Chief Kiley spent a number of years here beyond just 3. And the reason for that was that we were on an older contract, and in addition to that, Chief had notified us some time ago that he had planned to retire. And so the sheriff had made a decision along the way to just sort of let him finish out his career in Riverbank. It's what he wanted to do. The city was very happy, and so worked out. In this new contract, the county has requested a 3-year term with an optional 1-year extension if mutually agreed to by both parties. Obviously, if the point of the provision is to allow the different command staff that may be interested in competing for a chief's job here in Riverbank to get the opportunity and not have to wait a 10-year period because we have a chief we really like. And there's some value to that. It also gives the opportunity for our chief, if he's interested in exploring other exciting opportunities within the sheriff's department, that there's a reasonable timeline. Our only concern about it would be that there's extremely important to have ongoing consistent leadership in the police department. And so this is about as short a period of time as I would be comfortable with. Anything shorter than this, I think, would be worrisome. But at 3 years plus an optional 1-year extension, you do get a 4-year period. And then I suppose that there's opportunities. The language, I don't think it directly addresses whether that chief can reapply for another term. But I suspect that if it was really important to us, we could work something out. The other component here, and this ironically, is that this is a 4-year contract anyway. So presumably we get through the whole rest of this law enforcement contract, and then a chief's position is up right about the same time. So again, need to have the opportunity to negotiate that on the next contract. And that's really pretty much it. The remainder will remain the same. I'll tell you that I've said this to many people, and I'm happy to say it publicly, that I was very skeptical when I came to the city of Riverbank about the concept of contracting for law enforcement services. And I'm a convert now. I very much believe that when the relationship is good and you have a long-standing history of that we reap a lot of the benefits of a very sophisticated police department at a fraction of the cost. So our recommendation when we bring forward next meeting will be approval of the contract. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, even on things I didn't address here.
Questions, comments from the council?
Hey, Sean, just one quick question I had on the vehicle replacement cost. Were we able to confirm if that cost includes the new vehicle for the new deputy?
Yeah, Maricela, it's actually something, thank you very much, Vice Mayor, for bringing that up. Maricela, one of the things that Vice Mayor noticed was an increase in vehicle replacement cost in year to year. And my assumption, although I hadn't had a chance to check it with you, was that that was related to the additional deputy and the additional vehicle. Am I right about that, or was there just a larger than normal year?
That's partially correct. The fee is based on a per mile basis. And so with the addition of a deputy, they take into consideration the estimated amount of miles that they will travel. And the fee is off of that. So yes, it does include a portion of that, but there is also a kind of a natural inflator in there that they include as well.
All right, I do have a couple of questions. First off, you said, the chief may want to go to something more exciting, and I can't see anything more exciting than Riverbank. However, for the development of the chief, just like in my previous position 20 years ago or so, when you have an opportunity, you apply for it, you get it. Yes, it does a little bit of turmoil, but that's for the betterment of the overall force. And I do agree with that. One of the things that I just would like to have some type of report on is, as we render services outside the city, we don't get backfilled on that. For example, you need to go to Oakdale to help out with the bomb that was out in front of the high school. How much time do we actually spend outside the city limits? And I don't want to negotiate. I just want to look at that as we come up with the total for the next contract, the follow-on contract. And although we are also putting in exactly 3% per year increases in the contract, is there any provision to say, well, we may be in a recession or we may even be in a depression? Do we get relief? And I'm not saying yes or no to that. I think that should be an agreement between the county and the contracting cities, that if there is a depression, which we are at those numbers, just haven't realized a lot of the issues with them, can we have a 2% increase, a 1% increase, or a minus 2% increase if that's what happens?
We have that discussion every year. I'm guessing every single contract that's ever been negotiated along these lines, that's been asked by the cities that, can you limit our exposure, or can the door swing both ways if the economy turns around? Generally, my experience here, and Maricela can speak to this a little bit, is when we run into budgetary woes as a result of the economy, the Sheriff's Department has worked with us with regard to either adjustment of staffing. A lot of that, some of those funds that you have in your reserve currently are a result of salary savings, where, in fact, when I first got here, I remember Maricela and I met with the chief, and we were really struggling financially, and he found ways to sort of pause on additional staff, because not to an unsafe level, but in a way that could help us save funds, so that we weren't seeing we weren't experiencing the full increase of that 3%. So generally, yes. And I'll go back. There is a provision, and I'm trying to locate it on my agenda as we speak. But I'll when I bring it next time, I'll highlight it with regard to kind of what flexibility there is if we run into a really serious situation. But generally, what we found is that the Sheriff's Department has, when we can't afford something, they have tried to work with us to try to figure out how we can solve the problem while still getting the service.
And mind you, the figures that we received for future projections are projections. They actually bill us on actuals. So every month, I don't receive a flat billing. I actually receive a billing of actual payroll, actual vehicle costs, actual expenses that are made. So if they have any budget shortfalls and make cutbacks, then we see that reflected in our billing as well. So particularly where we have a lot of savings is on the vehicle replacement. Obviously, they budget for worst case scenario. A vehicle gets totaled, has to be replaced before its end of life. And so usually that's where we'll see in this year's contract, probably see about $60,000 to $70,000 in savings just in that line item alone. So don't think that they take that annual figure divided by 12 and then that's our contract. We get billed on actuals.
And it's part of it is also kind of making, and we work pretty closely with the chief to make sure that overtime is watched pretty carefully. And in general, there have been blips here and there, but in general, they've been very responsible in their spending. One other thing that I just want to point out, because it's a super expensive thing to do. And I do think council should, recognize when you've been making positive progress, but remember that a couple of years ago, your ratio of officers to population was, I think, about 0.70. With the addition of this officer that was just added, you're up to 0.77. And if there's room for another position, a sworn position, you will be up to 0.81, 0.82. So you're making progress towards that 1 to 1,000 ratio, which is great.
Okay. Without any further comment, all I want to say is, again, I know I am, and I believe most of the all the council is very pleased with our association with the Sheriff's Department. They are a force multiplier with especially the helicopter, the rescue. We had Mr. Betancourt that was murdered outside the AMPM in 2009, and they threw their entire resources without any cost to the city and found the people who committed the crime in different cities, Turlock, Modesto, I believe Empire's not a city, but Empire. So I'm really pleased with our association, and it is a good value for our buck. So again, I want to thank the sheriff and the sheriff's department and our new chief, who will be looking forward for 10 years here. Any other guidance for the or direction? Seeing none, we're going to move forward. And Sean, thank you for the report. And Chief, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Annabelle, is there anyone wishing to speak on item 4.2?
There is no one wishing to speak, and there are no emails for item 4.2.
Is there anyone on public comment that you see on Zoom?
There's no attendee wishing to speak on Zoom.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the public for being there too. On item 5, public hearings. Oh, by the way, this is an item that item 4.2. This is an item for direction which has been provided. Item 5. At this time, anyone wishing to comment on public hearing item 5.1 via email can send them to cityclerk@riverbank.org. Item 5.1, first reading and introduction of a proposed ordinance approving a development agreement by and between the City of Riverbank and Canna, Mart, LLC, a California limited liability corporation doing business as Canna Mart. If approved, a second reading will be scheduled to occur at the next regular City Council meeting on June 23rd rather than July 28th as indicated.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Our planning and building manager, Donna Kenny, is going to give this report, and I think she's going to share her screen for a PowerPoint.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's so good to see you again. Glad you're all well. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation and split my screen here. Thank you, Annabelle. I had a hard time finding the unmute button with this screen up. So the applicants are asking for a development agreement. And as you know, a development agreement regulates the business itself. It spells out the benefits and responsibilities of the city and the applicant. The second thing is they've been to the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit. The conditional use permit regulates the site, and the Planning Commission did approve that with a 4-to-1 vote in their last regular meeting. If the project is successful, there would be a future architectural and site plan review for a new building. They are proposing a new building of approximately 5,000 square feet. And this would also include future landscaping and irrigation review and approval. It is hoped that this new development will encourage surrounding businesses to invest in their properties as well. So this is an aerial of the project site. The blue arrow, is the vacant lot where this project is. You can see off to the right how Callender Ave joins Patterson Road there at the curve. This is a long, narrow lot that is surrounded by a lot of commercial and residential uses, including directly to the east. There is a live-in facility. There is grocery stores. There are car repair places, hay sales, restaurants. There's a lot of activity in this area of the city. Oh, and by the way, that lot is approximately 13,700 square feet. So this is a conceptual site plan that's overlaid on. Since the building itself would need to go to architectural and site plan review to kind of give you an idea of what the applicants are thinking. They did submit this to the pre-application review committee, which is planning, building, development services, city engineer, public works, most of the staff and administrative staff. The staff reviewed this site plan for approximately 2 weeks, gave them our comments, and so this conceptual site plan has not been revised yet. It doesn't have correct setbacks. It may not have the correct amount of parking spaces, but this is just to give you an idea of what they're planning. And this building is proposed to have a second story that would just hold offices. And then the downstairs would be the storage and the lobby and the security areas. This is a conceptual floor plan. You can see the outlines of the various uses a little bit more clearly than when it was on the aerial. Off to the right there, that's the proposed second story. So the development agreement, the main elements of it are, it is a term of 3 years. They are proposing both medicinal and adult use, as well as some retail delivery, as our other 2 dispensaries are currently doing. The public benefit payment towards infrastructure services and neighborhood burdens would go into effect once the building is constructed and occupied and the conditional use permit begins. So the first step would be for 0 to 6 months. There would be a flat payment of $10,000 or 5% of the gross receipts, whichever is greater. Second step is the 7 to 12 months at $15,000 or the 5%. And then to the end of the term, $20,000 or 5%. In order to approve the DA, you must determine that it is consistent with the general plan, that it will not be detrimental to the health or safety, general welfare of the city. I'd like to touch lightly on that point. The applicants are currently operating a dispensary in Modesto called Doctor's Choice. And when they submitted their application, they did submit some information from the City of Modesto Police Department, which indicated that they were running a safe facility and that they hadn't had any calls for service since they had begun their operations. So that leads us to the third, that this project should not affect the orderly development or property values in the area. The DA must be consistent with the government code, the state code that regulates development agreements. And the DA must contain a legal description of the property, which is attachment A to the development agreement itself. With the conditional use permit that was approved by the Planning Commission, building is finally constructed, if they are successful. The exterior lighting conditions, that all the lighting is facing downward and does not affect the neighbors, while it does provide the security that they need. There's a hold harmless agreement, and then, of course, no loitering would be allowed. And they have an extensive security plan, and that is one piece of it, is to not allow any loitering. As far as the community connection, I added this in because we don't have the public here and we don't have the applicants here. And they shared with me that they want to fit into the neighborhood and they are willing to invest in business. They have also expressed an interest in donating to our events and recreation programs. Or perhaps the city might be interested in a donation towards a public relations campaign for the city to show what's good in the city. Staff did review this application for general plans consistency, so any development agreement and use permit should follow the guiding principle of our general plan, that the city should be safe and healthy for all our residents. Environmental, as far as CEQA goes, the CEQA guidelines, this project does qualify for Class 32 infill exemption. And a recommendation. The council has 3 options regarding the project, which include the motion to introduce the DEA ordinance for first reading, to continue the introduction for a first reading if you would like to make some changes or some revisions to the development agreement, or you could also, your third option would be to deny the project. I would be happy to answer any questions, and my understanding is that the business owners and their representative, their engineer, and their security person are all hopefully either on Zoom or have called in.
Thank you very much for that report, Donna. By the
You're
way,
welcome.
the entire council extends our condolences to you and your family.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the beautiful flowers that was sent on behalf of the city. Thank you.
All right. Before I proceed to the council, is there any comments that your applicant would like to make to the city council?
Okay, we have Rod Olson, who has raised his hand, and I'm going to unmute him to allow to talk.
I believe that's Rod Olson.
Yes, Rod Olson.
Okay, I heard a different name. Okay, good.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Mayor, council members, and city managers, it's great to be with you this evening. First of all, I'd like to thank staff. Donna has just been absolutely fantastic to work with on this. I've worked with several different governmental jurisdictions, from the state to different cities to the county, and I've never met someone more responsive than she has, frankly. And she's just been a joy to work with. You have a great city manager who's been very responsive as well, and your city clerk has been responsive to all my inquiries as well. So good job there. So, like Donna said, we have myself here. We have the applicants on here. We have the security professionals. We also have the alarm company, and we're here to answer any of your questions. The way we look at this is we look at this as a partnership, an interview process. The city is going through and looking for a good candidate, someone that they would like to partner with for years to come. And in my experience working with these applicants, because I worked with them, I started working with them a year ago in the city of Modesto. Now, I don't know if any of you have been on Yosemite Boulevard towards El Vista, right there in the corner. That's a pretty rough patch of area. And they started this and were licensed and in this business for the past year. And they've gone through the challenges of the state changing the regulations and meeting with the city and partnering with them. They've been through it. They've done this before. This is not new to them. Should be noted also that they were the first applicants in the state of California for a retail license to be granted to them without having a provisional license beforehand. A lot of these businesses were already in place, were granted provisional licenses, and then worked through the process to get their annual. They did not. They went straight for their annual. They waited patiently to be granted the license by the state to start their business. And frankly, they jumped over a lot of applicants that had provisionals, frankly, because they dotted their I's and crossed their T's and got the job done. These are fantastic individuals. It's actually it's what I call an American success story. Your applicants here are first generation. They're immigrants from India. They've been living in this community in Stanislaus County for decades. They've opened retail establishments throughout the county. I believe at one point it was up to 5. They have a business model that works. They stress low costs, low prices, and a high quality of service. Now, you might be asking yourself, why Riverbank? Well, for them it makes sense because they started tracking where their business was coming from. And if you could imagine, and I think there's been some people that have mentioned, is there enough business in Riverbank? Well, in looking at their data, they estimate 530 clients a month come from the city of Oakdale and the city of Riverbank that drive all the way to the south side of Modesto to purchase their products. Well, why? Well, it's the business model, and they have agreements with distributors that they are the only ones that can sell those products. And people like those products. And so they'll travel that distance to go to their store, their doctor's choice. So it only made sense for them to bring their business closer to their customers. In working with the city, it was identified that this property, this was something, we want this to, people want this developed. And I can speak to that because I actually lived at one time, I lived in Riverbank up to a year ago. I was there living in Cal Campbell's district when Flavors was brought before the city council. And you know what? I was one of those residents that was against the product, against the proposal, actually. I was not for it. I did not have clients in this industry. And what I learned that is, frankly, it's a widget. This is about business. And is this going to be a responsive business person? These applicants that have come before you have shown me nothing but the desire to be involved in your community, to do what's right. And if there's concerns about perception issues, they're willing to help the city with those perception issues. They don't want to create any waves. They only want to help people. They only want to help your community, and they only want to come in and serve. So, anyway, we're here to answer any questions. Donna already highlighted it. I would like to highlight it to you as well. In your packet there is a letter from the city of Modesto from the Assistant Chief of Police, Brandon Gillespie, who has become a good friend, I guess you could say, of these applicants since the project has opened. They have a great working relationship. And if you can imagine, on Yosemite Boulevard, it's a rough part of town. And they have not had one incident since May of last year. Not one since they opened their doors. Now, I wish that they could write a letter and support this project and give an endorsement, but frankly, they can't. But this is as close to getting to that endorsement that they could get. So that letter is fantastic, and you have an applicant that's willing to do whatever the city of Riverbank would like them to do because, like I said, they want to be a partner with you, and we hope you choose them. So we're here to answer any questions if you should have them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I bring it to council for discussion, I would like to open this as a public hearing. The public hearing is open to the public for public comment. If you are a Zoom, please raise your hand feature or dial *9 on your phone. Annabelle, is there anyone wishing to speak?
Mayor, there is no one else wishing to speak on this right now.
Do we have any emails concerning this item?
There are no emails.
Mr. Mayor, this is Donna.
Yes, Donna.
For the Planning Commission meeting, we put the materials for this project on our website 2 weeks early. And at the time of the Planning Commission meeting, I had received the one email, which is part of your packet.
Right.
And since that meeting, I have not received any other emails or correspondence on this project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I now close the public hearing. I want to open it up for discussion with the council. I do know that there are some trepidations or some concerns about having another dispensary. As history goes with the dispensaries, we have seen that they are very good at generating some revenue that we need in areas as public safety, the camera system, additional officers, deputies. And I know I want to hear from all of you who have it. But the thing that I am glad about, which is very difficult to do, is have an infill project. Infill projects are probably the most difficult to complete, and makes the state and the land use authorities happy. I'm also impressed that they have accommodation from the assistant chief from the Modesto Police Department. I'm not so concerned that the residents are going to another area, but speaking with our deputies this weekend, when we had the possibility of some discussions, they were all for, every one of them was for having dispensaries that will help pay for security for the city of Riverbank. And I view this as a business that we need to, it's a legitimate business, and we need to take a stigma away from it. And I know that some of you have your own opinions on what this type of business brings to a neighborhood or an area, but it is legitimate. Think about during the Prohibition, and as soon as it opened, everyone imbibed and things went out. We had a lot of expansion quickly. We are controlling the expansion. The amount of monies that we have collected from flavors is significant, and they're providing us $85,000 now this month. And it's something that we cannot ignore as we question, or at least I question, where are we going to be in revenues in the next couple of years as we go through the COVID, and it's going to have a second and a third wave, and a possible severe recession to a depression. Can we afford not to tap into this as a revenue source? Not only that, they're great people. I have not met them. I have talked to those who know them. And I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go and talk with them. But from my understanding, they are the greatest people that you can do business with, other than me. So I'm going to bring it to you, the council, for your discussion. And whoever wants to go first, please raise your hand, and or just jump on in. We have Vice Mayor.
Vice Mayor here. I'll keep it brief. I think most of the council already knows where I stand on businesses like this. I think there has been a bad stigma for cannabis in general for a very long time. And I do also support, legitimate businesses just like this. So I'm in full support for this business as well. That's all I'd have to say.
Thank you.
This is Cal Campbell. Can I speak?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, I had the opportunity to visit this dispensary last Friday. I spent an hour there talking to the people, looking at it firsthand. I'm quite familiar with the Yosemite area that they're in on Yosemite Avenue. It is a very rough part of town, and I was very impressed at the security they had. They had plenty of cameras with the split screens in a private room. Their area where they stored their product was completely enclosed with metal, including the roof, and they are completely fenced in the back with an 8-foot fence. And when the product is delivered, they open the gate, close it, and unload it right in there. They've taken very good pains to have good security. I was impressed also with the layout of their building. It was, when you went into the room for the product to buy it, they had COVID-19 all set up. They had 6 cash registers. They were spread out at least 6 feet apart, and it just looked like a very good organization to me. I was impressed with it quite much, and I also was impressed with the people. I talked to them personally, like you said, Mayor, and they are good quality, hardworking people. I asked them, well, why did you pick Riverbank? And their comment was, well, we see a market there. We're getting people from Riverbank. And I thought to myself, well, if they're willing to put it there, and I think that this location is a better location than the last one that we talked about. I think it balances and fits this area better, especially with an empty lot there that they're going to develop. And I felt that this could be a very good thing for the city, so I personally am supporting it.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to comment.
Yes, you may.
Donna, can you put back the picture that showed where this building is located, please?
Next one or this one?
No, keep going where it shows where it's sitting with the other businesses, where it shows Patterson Road and Calendar. Yeah, that one. Okay, this is where my concern is. This area on Patterson is a nightmare. To get in and out of that facility will be bad for traffic. I think it's even worse than the first one the Flavors. You've got a curve that doesn't make it easy to see what oncoming traffic is, and you have people coming the other way, not really paying attention to what's coming out. Do I go left? Do I go right? I have a major concern for that. And as most of you know, I also am not in favor of a third location right now in Riverbank. I think 2 is good, but I'm more concerned too about the location. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And I understand your concern about having a third one, but this is a business that is legal and it is competitive with any other business that they have, whether it is a third one, a second one that is not doing as well. But then you take a look at, if you take a look at Carl's Jr., that's on more of the worst of the curve. And then you have the market with the donut shop and the laundromat right there, which is used tremendously. Then you have an auto sale, which has been doing very good. So here is a flatter area. So take that away from it. So to me, your only concern is that you don't want to have a third one in the city of Riverbank. And I truly understand that.
It's not me, it's my citizens. The people that I've talked to, they don't want a third right now. The 2 are doing well and the 2 are filling their need. So I speak for my citizens, my district. I still do have concerns about the traffic. Carl's Jr. is right at the light, so they don't have as much of an issue, but I still have some concerns. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, I hear a lot different. I'm not in your district, and I do hear totally different where people were upset, kind of like Mr. Olson was saying, I didn't want it, and now it's good. And when I tell them how much we're getting for public safety, they're more for it than they are against it. So thank you again, Cindy, and I appreciate your comment. And Councilmember Barbara Martinez, do you have comments? I'm sure you do.
Yes, I do. First of all, I have a lot of static on my end. I don't know if anyone else does, but my reception is horrible. So I just think also
Donna,
that,
can you mute yourself, because I think that may be your source.
Shall I continue?
Please do. Please do. I was trying to get Donna to mute.
Okay.
Get me to mute?
So I agree with Councilmember Fossey that the traffic in that area, when you try to come out of Ray's Market and the donut shop there, it's really bad trying to turn on to Patterson. But I do think that this new building will be somewhat of an asset, or like a good location, for the area. I think it'll give it a lift because it's going to be a new building, and perhaps it may give some of the other buildings in the area to want to spruce up and maybe look a little bit better too. And I've heard both sides of the story from my constituents that we don't need another 3 locations of cannabis in our city, but then there's others that say, that I don't mind because it is a viable business. So I'm leaning kind of like both sides. We'll see when it comes down to my vote. But I'm just, welcoming the business and for their effort in wanting to be a part of the Riverbank business community. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to try influencing votes or anything like that. That's not my thing. If you're on the fence or you would like to think about it, by disapproving it, it's another year. If you think, okay, well, maybe we do the second reading and I'm not totally convinced, that's when we can say no. But I would like to offer you, all of you, the opportunities to take a look at, be invited to their operations in Modesto and is it Empire, the other one? But I want that to be an option. It's not one that Donna put, but it doesn't alleviate the idea that I can, or we can move forward to the second reading and still say no. And that is your option. So before I close, did I close public hearing, Annabelle?
Yes, you did, Mayor.
Okay. So now we're at what we are going to do. Is there a motion to approve the first reading and introduction of the proposed ordinance to initiate the second reading at the regular council meeting on June 23rd?
Vice Mayor Uribe here. I'll make a motion. We approve that 5.1.
Cal Campbell would like to second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by the Vice Mayor and a second by Councilmember Campbell to approve the first reading and introduction and propose that the second reading be conducted on the 23rd of June. Roll call, please.
Council members Barbara Martinez.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Fossey.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Yes. Yes,
So if I say yes, I still have an opportunity to say no at the second reading.
Yes, you do. You have an opportunity to say no anytime you want.
Okay, because I'm okay with it going for a second reading. I'll do more research. So yes.
Thank you there.
Vice Mayor Uribe.
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. And Annabelle, there is an annotation that as we move forward, we can all say no.
Correct.
Okay. All right, new business. 6.1, one of our favorite topics that we have been enjoying for the last 4 years. The illegal fireworks enforcement update.
It really is such a blessing to get to talk about illegal fireworks again. And I just love this part of my job. And thank you all so much for choosing me. As council knows, Councilmember Campbell and Fossey did some work a year and a half ago now on a new ordinance for illegal fireworks, as the situation here in Riverbank has really sort of spiraled out of control with regard to, I mean, it's the same everywhere, but we wanted to figure out a proactive way to address it, because just doing nothing wasn't certainly improving the situation. So I'm going to go through a quick history, and then a little bit about lessons learned, and then I want to talk as a group about other ideas you may have. As I said, you approved the illegal fireworks ordinance in July of last year. City staff and Riverbank Police Services manned a phone and enforcement team to address and cite for illegal firework use. So we basically had a call-in number, and we had a little group of city staff that gave up their Donna, myself, Michael, Norma, and a couple other folks gave up their 4th of July holidays on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th to man that. And also a number of officers were assigned by the chief to work, I think it was 3 officers or 4, to work the calls. And so initially our concept was that we would kind of operate it as like a little dispatch center, because Regional 911 does not take fireworks phone calls on the 4th. They just simply have way too much going on, and it's not a priority. And so this was our way to give the community the opportunity to report their concerns. So we had we had many phone calls. Norma probably has the exact numbers, but I think we certainly received over 100 complaints over the 3 days, maybe even closer to 200. Well, I'll get to that. So what I think is important is, what did we learn about the process that we can improve on this year? So it was our first year. We really didn't know what to expect. We didn't know how much people were going to actually going to use the call-in line. What we learned pretty quickly was it's very difficult for officers or staff in the field to respond to each complaint because of the volume. By the time you go, let's say you pull up to, we'll pick on Councilmember Fossey, you pull up to her house, she's shooting off bottle rockets in her front yard, you go talk to her, we're on a no tolerance policy, remember, so she's getting a ticket. And you got maybe another 5 minutes to write the ticket, and you hop into your car and there's another calling. So that's a 10 to 15 minute sort of call generally. And when we were really receiving large volumes of them, we would have backlogs of sometimes 20 or 30 calls. And by the time that we would get in order to the ones that had been reported, either the activity had stopped, the location information we got was bad and wasn't the correct area. And so, especially on the 4th of July, one of our officers called and said, "Hey, I'm just going to drive sort of randomly, because I could pull down just about any street in Riverbank and cite somebody for illegal fireworks." And that's what he did. In fact, at one point it got so busy that we actually sent out Chief Kiley, and I think that council may recall that his car actually got hit by an illegal firework as he was driving through River Cove. And he cited that person. So we think this year a better idea might be to do a more sector-based approach, where we're zonal, where we set up teams in areas where we know we have high concentrations, and we will still take calls, because I think it's really important for members of the public to have the opportunity to make that complaint, because I think the frustration they have with dispatch is they call in to complain, and they're essentially told, "Thank you for the report, but we're not responding to that." And so this gives us the opportunity to at least get the complaint and do what we can to address it. We also learned that where possible, photographic evidence is critically important, especially in potential appeals. As you recall, you had a couple of appeals, and those can be very intense situations. And so this year, just so that there's absolutely no question, where possible, we're going to try to get more photographic evidence, so there's not a bunch of sort of he said, she said going on. And finally, the 3rd and the 4th are the key days. We found that on the 5th, we almost had no calls. I think we had 2 calls. that day, which could have gone through dispatch because it was past the 4th. So we didn't probably get our bang for our buck on the 5th. So our recommendation this year would probably be to man minimally the 4th, but probably most appropriately would be the 3rd and the 4th, because that's a Friday, Saturday this year, and we expect that it will be busy. Changes. As I mentioned, the zone-based approach, and I've Chief and Norma and Donna and I have met on this and just kind of discussed, but more officer and staff initiated citations, meaning if you see it, cite it. Possible use of explorers for hotline call takers. So the chief is reaching out to his explorer network to see if we can get some of those young folks donate some time and take phone calls that night. And exploration of possible use of the sheriff's department drone team. We're still exploring this option, but this was something that Councilmember Campbell felt very strongly about, that perhaps there's a way we can enforce in a smarter way. So if this is something that the sheriff's department could do, it'd be a little bit added cost to us, but it might be worth trying for one of the evenings to see how many more citations we can get when you have an aerial view of exactly where these aerial fireworks are going off. Because the difficulty is when we get, I would say of all of the reports, half of them were just very generalized. I think there are fireworks shooting off over here. And it's really hard to tell exactly where something's coming from when it's flying in the air and it's, a quarter mile away from you. So that was another concept. And then Norma and I are just getting started on working on additional marketing, community outreach. We're going to do, Councilmember Fossey, I think, gave me a couple ideas about a brightly colored banner that we have seen in other projects in other towns that really draws attention. And we still have the signs from last year. So if you're so inclined, I'll be giving some out to the council to give to the community and use. And just try to, ideally what we'd want at the end of the day is the more people know about it, hopefully the more local cultural enforcement we have, where neighbors see something and they say something to their neighbors like, hey, please don't do that. I know it's fun, but it's really dangerous, and we're trying to have a community that doesn't have as much of that anymore. And that's pretty much what we're considering doing. We'll be reporting back again. But the reason why I put this little hello, my name is consistency thing is we knew going into this that this was going to be a multi-year effort. We didn't expect that we were going to see a whole lot of compliance in year 2 or maybe even in year 3. But what we've heard from other communities is the longer your programs are in place and the more consistent they are, eventually you do start to see improvements along those lines. So that's our goal. And I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain any ideas that council would like to add to this as we move forward.
First off, I want to thank Councilmember Campbell and Councilmember Fossey for their efforts. And I know you have comments and also more recommendations. So I'll start off with the council before I open it up for public comment.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of comments. First of all, I was really impressed last year with the hotline that we had. I think it was great, but I agree with Sean that having people in certain areas will be better. I myself was in Crossroads, and they were all around me, but I couldn't pinpoint what street they were on. So having somebody in different general areas where we had calls last year would be good, especially ones where we had multiple calls directing to an area. I know, like behind, off of Roselle and between Roselle and where Home Depot is, there's a place over there that gets a lot of calls. I don't know if we were able to catch him last year or not. And more signs out, I think, will help. Another issue that I'm having right now is there's somebody in my neighborhood, Chief, that's letting them off, and he's been doing it the last week or 2. Do we accept calls on those now, or I don't know what we're doing about that, but that's something to consider, because maybe we need to add that to the ordinance that they're not allowed at any time. And if they're outside of July 4th, where do we have citizens call? Because I haven't been able to tell people where to call. Otherwise, it sounds great.
So I can tell you that aerial fireworks are illegal year round, and we do take the calls at SR 911 year round as well. Obviously, during the July 4th, they're inundated with calls to the point where it becomes debilitating to the department for SR 911 to even just do the basic services, and that's why they have to say, granted, we got your call. We're letting deputies know, and they're taking care of those. But yeah, the rest of the year, definitely have people call in. If you can identify a location and direct us in there, we can take some enforcement action.
Cal, you look like you want to say something.
I do. First of all, I agree with everything that Councilmember Fossey said, but I want to add a couple of things. I'm also getting a lot of fireworks in my area the past couple of weeks, and I mentioned it to the chief, and it's been hard to pinpoint them, but I think we need to try to stop them as much as we can so it doesn't get a little rampant before the 4th. And the 4th is going to be the first real holiday since we've been self-quarantined. And I think that the more that we do now to slow it down, the better it'll be then, because I have just a strange feeling that a lot of people are just going to really want to celebrate. And there's going to be maybe more problems than we might normally have on the 4th because of their self-containment for these last 3 months. And also, we've had a lot of high winds, and that concerns me because with these high winds, these fireworks are really a serious danger for fire, and it's a dry year. So report it so that it can be caught now to the Sheriff's Department, because we need to stop that to protect our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Councilmember Barbara Martinez?
Yes, I agree that we probably will have more families wanting to do some kind of spend.
Darlene, just a second. Cal, can you mute yourself? I'll mute my. Sure.
Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I think that we probably will have more families getting together, during this holiday, and also because it's on a Saturday, I do believe. So I think we need to do a reminder that if people are going to have, events at their block parties or so forth, that we need to make sure that they get a permit, and that they'll have, what times are supposed to be, that they cut the noise off and so forth. And I think that would be a good idea to do a reminder.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Vice Mayor, have you spoke?
No, thank you, Mayor. So I do like how we're taking what we saw last year and we're making those changes. So, and I like everything I'm seeing in the slides there. I do like how we're going to have people out on the ground in those sectors. We mapped it out. We mapped out the calls last year. If we could continue to do that, I think data, that kind of data is going to be important for the years going forward. And I do like how we're just completely dropping out the 5th since we only had 2 total calls that day. Yeah, I'm liking everything I see. Thank you.
Thank you all. Not every one of my ideas are popular. So I'm going to make a recommendation to the city manager and the chief is that we explore shot spotters, which can, kind of triangulate where shots are being fired, but also where illegal fireworks are being shot off. From what I understand, being in conventions where they have them, they're not that expensive, and I think we can afford it. Is it feasible to take a look at, for shots, which we don't have that many of in, but to me, a illegal firework can do much more damage than a lot of the other illegal activities, especially as you mentioned, Councilmember Campbell, in a high wind situation and the dryness that we have in this region. So I like the plan, but I would like to investigate either this year or for next year a shot spotter program, which can be attached to our cameras that can do two things. It can identify where the shot's coming from. And if you have some reactive cameras, you can see it in the air. But that's just my idea for the future. But I again want to thank the council, especially Councilmember Fossey and Campbell, for their work on this program. It's been one that has been brewing, I know of, for the last 9 years. Comments before I open it up to the public from the city manager or the chief? I guess not.
Well, Mayor, I think what I'll do is we'll do some pricing of those tools and get an idea about their applicability to how they might work with regard to the fireworks side, and get you some detailed information so council can make a decision about whether that's something that you want to fund.
Councilmember Barbara Martinez. Chief, I like the idea of us using the Explorers to answer the calls. Is there a cost to the city for that?
No, the Explorers be volunteer to the city.
Thank you. It's a good idea.
Other than maybe some, I think it more for the night.
I hope it happens. Thank you.
Well, I'm personally going to cover pizza if they show up. So
you should. We give you a pay raise. This is a public hearing. I open this item for public comment. If you're on Zoom, use the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone. Annabelle, is there anyone wishing to speak on item 5.1?
Mayor, there is no one wishing to speak on this item, and there are no emails.
I now close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve? Is this a?
Is this direction?
Is staff clear about the kind of muddled direction we gave you?
Yes. Yep.
Chief, are you clear?
I am clear as well.
All right. The goal is not to cite anyone. The goal is to ensure that we have compliance within the city. And I hope this year we have more offenses than we do citations. Truly, that's our entire goal. Okay, got to get rid of that one. Item 6.2, General Local Public Health COVID-19 Update.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one sec while I pull up my presentation. Okay. I'm going to go fairly quickly through this because I think this is becoming a very tiresome item for council, but there just continues to be things we need direction on. So, very briefly, let me see here. Oh, there we go. You see some data. This is from the Stanislaus County dashboard. One thing I thought was sort of interesting is in my staff report that I wrote last Wednesday, and I usually try to get those in. Really, I should have them done by Tuesday, but last Wednesday, I wrote in the report that there was 660 some odd cases positive cases in Stanislaus County as of last Wednesday. This is as of this afternoon. So you see 937. So that's it's a little less than 200 cases in just under a week. We're seeing similar trends and spikes in I was talking with the city attorney earlier, and he was saying that in a number of other areas, 20% increases over the last week have seemed to be fairly common. So concerning numbers, and Riverbank's actual figure is still lower than many other places, but we're at 39 positives here in town. Here's some state data just to give you an idea of sort of what's happening here at the local level. The total cases, 131,000. You see hospitalizations, and then you have over 4,600 fatalities, and you can see even the breakdown in between age groups and gender. Here's, I always like to include these graphs because I think they tell a pretty interesting story, which is positive COVID-19 hospital patients. And then that percentage increase is a pretty critical number because it gives us an idea about what our system looks like in terms of being able to treat people. Actually, since last council meeting, as you know, we have reopened facilities under modified conditions, with the exceptions of playgrounds, pool, and picnic areas. With regard to the pool, we do have our staff trained and ready to go. In conversation with the city attorney just before the meeting, it does not appear that there's really been any additional guidance on pool, and his advice is not to open until that's very clear from the state. So it's still expressly prohibited. We think we can move back potential opening another 2 weeks and still have a good season if that comes in the next 2 weeks. If it doesn't, we will probably have to report back on other options because it doesn't leave us with much of a summer after that. And we may be able to put something together if we get allowances later in the summer, but it makes it a lot more difficult. And I'm going to get to some of the parks related stuff towards the end. Just because I think it's very interesting. Here is, last week, the state of California announced additional approved businesses that can reopen under phase 2. And there are modifications. You have family entertainment centers, restaurants, wineries, bars, zoos, museums, gyms and fitness centers, hotels for tourism, individual travel, card rooms, racetrack, campgrounds, and outdoor recreation. So, for example, even though it's being limited, Woodward Reservoir was very much open this last weekend, and they are capping the number of people allowed in, but they are allowing, and they're even allowing camping currently. Here's what's not allowed to reopen: tattoos and body waxing, indoor playgrounds, movie and live theaters, sauna and steam rooms, nightclubs, concert venues, festivals, theme parks, and higher education. So all of the things you would assume typically are probably those types of things. I'm doubting will get any approval probably well through phase 3.
Can I jump in real quick?
Oh, please, yes.
If you could jump back one slide. My understanding is that movie theaters were just added to the list to reopen Friday.
Yeah, they just came out with that.
Well, see, shows how what I thought was pretty accurate it's not already. So, yeah, and what we're sort of seeing happen is, and it may be a result of sort of industry groups really putting pressure on the governor, because it just seems very random, these decisions about what can and can't. So thank you for that. And I'll get some more detail.
Another thing, Sean, that you don't have on there that's very important to a lot of the female citizens, nail salons are still not allowed to open. So
correct, yes.
And on the list.
Yes, and
if I may interject, Sean?
Yes, sir.
This is what Dr. V said she is going to authorize or not authorize. She'll have a more definitive list on Friday. But as of Friday, this is what she is going to approve. And we have to follow what she has been stating as her fact of law. So we'll ask for more clarification on pools, which is my big concern. I think with the opening of gyms, they have pools in it. So I believe that the pools are open, contrary to our legal counsel. And we'll get better clarification from Dr. V. Again, for the spas, I have a wife that does my nails.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I don't know how I was supposed to follow that. The other thing that the governor and the mayor is correct. This is at the discretion of the health director. So the governor seems to have sort of taken an about face and is now putting more authority back on the public health directors locally to determine what's appropriate, which, from our perspective would have been great from the beginning, but nonetheless. So here is what we are dealing with, and there's just really a couple items we'd like a little council direction on. And I know that in the past we've gone through very lengthy discussions on these, and I don't think that's necessary tonight, but there was one in particular that Sue, a couple in particular that Sue, who I think is on the line, wanted a little direction on, and specifically, we want to report back on the practicality of Jacob Myers Park and sort of the limited capacity that Sue is trying to implement on a daily basis based on council direction. And we believe in the beginning it was the right decision to make, but practically what we found as a consequence of having to enforce it is that it's become very difficult for the limited staff that are out there to reasonably shut down at half capacity, because we're seeing one of two things occur. We're seeing a lot of very aggressive people that are frustrated who have driven a long ways to come to the facility, kind of create scenes. And we are also seeing people say, well, that's fine, I'll just park on the roadway here, and this is a very big park that's not fenced in, and they find a way in sooner or later. And so then you get into these situations where you have to try to kick people out. And when you can imagine that when you're dealing with what could be over 100 individuals or more, in a big park area, it becomes hard to manage. And so we've thought about it. We can continue with current direction, and we will continue to manage it as best we can. But we also had another concept, which was council really could make two other decisions. And I did clear this with the city attorney before the meeting. You could simply do away with the capacity restrictions, and we would post some very clear signage at the front of the park that you're entering at your own risk, and that you have to follow appropriate social distancing guidelines, and we list those, and all the other park rules.
Yeah. Okay, will do, Mayor.
I think it's not Kathy. What? But anyway,
Amanda.
if she could.
Yeah, Amanda, right.
Amanda, that's it. All right, Annabelle, are we okay because we gave direction?
Yes, we are, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Our next item is comments. Staff.
Thank you, Mayor. One comment I wanted to share with the whole council. The mayor, Councilmember Campbell, Stu, and the chief and I all attended a community meeting in River Cove to discuss how we can address the kind of, long-term issues that area has with people using the river and having too much to drink and just generally causing havoc in the neighborhood. And the meeting, I would say, started off a little frustrated by the members of the public, and I don't blame them. But I think towards the end, it ended up being a very positive experience. We have tripled security essentially in that area. The chief has increased patrols over there. In fact, they made some arrests this weekend. And we're going to work on the cameras. And our goal with the community was to come back in 6 weeks and report to them, or get their feedback on how these increased resources that we're spending have either helped or not helped the situation. And so I think that overall they were very pleased to have sort of as responsive as we can be in this situation. So I'm feeling fairly positive about it. I know Sue's been on top of it, Chief's been on top of it, and we'll be reporting back on that item. That's my only report this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Fossey?
I don't have any comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell?
Just like to add to what Sean said, I happened to go down Sunday and morning and just drive down there at the River Cove, and I saw the sheriffs arresting. And I'd like to thank the sheriffs for how quickly they're responding to what the public wants to do something. I think they're doing a fine job.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Barbara Martinez?
I just wanted to mention my attendance at the League of California Cities, the Community Policy Committee meeting that we had on Zoom, where I represent our city in the Central Valley. And during the midst of the protest, we were asked to consider two key questions, which I'd like to mention. One of them was, what policy issues should we address to help our communities at this time? The other question was, what resources do we need to respond to our communities? These two questions were in reference to having discussions about equality and justice. And we had a very interesting and lengthy discussion, and some good suggestions came out of that discussion, which we will be putting up to our and so they can hear from us. And then I also attended the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act webinar, so that I could get more of an understanding of what are more of our unfunded liabilities for this, for us to meet this requirement, and also the legislation that has been recently introduced. And I'm just asking for everyone to please reconsider wearing your mask when you're out in public. There are still so many people, because so many stay-at-home orders have been relaxed. I just think that people are forgetting that they need to wear their masks and still protect themselves and others too. Thank you.
Tom, may I ask for a clarification for Darlene? Tom Hallinan?
Yes.
Okay, Darlene, do you want us to state that we have to wear masks? Because we have not stated that.
When looking at I'm keeping a track. I have a note of the cases that are in our city. And in April 29th, we only had 12 cases. As of today, we have 39 cases. I mean, considering the population, you never know how high it's going to get. I still think that if we made it a requirement for people to wear a mask when you go outside, I think would help our residents immensely. I mean, this disease is not going away like tomorrow, so I think we need to consider that.
Well, I wear a mask when I'm at work and when I'm in close contact. You're right, we're getting more and more cases identified, but we're testing 10, 20, almost to 100 times more than we did a month ago. We've had, we started with maybe 75 cases, testings a day. Now we're doing close to over 1,000. And that is where you're going to be identifying. What we have to do is look at what is the availability. And I think, Sean, next time we really need to concentrate on what is the availability of respirators, ICU beds, and surge. Right now, we are maintaining the ICUs at hospitals that are available for COVID-19. We are increasing our capacity for ventilators because less people are on them. You could say because more people have died. But we have, 33 people who have died. Most of them are from congregate living facilities. And what I would like to do, I agree with you, Darlene, wear a mask when you feel comfortable, when you feel the need. But the big thing is, I think we should force the testing at our congregate living on Topeka as soon as possible. I don't think we have started testing there. And Sean, that is something, if you could move forward, I would appreciate. And Darlene, I appreciate your comments on that. No one has made a definitive, you should wear a mask. It's always been strongly suggested. So I strongly suggest it. Darlene, I thank you for bringing it up. And I think we all should strongly suggest that as we're out and about. Comment, Darlene? Darlene, do you have another comment on that?
Oh, no, I just think that when I see how many people are not wearing masks, and I just think that everybody, just those who are not wearing masks are taking a huge, huge risk. Like it won't happen to me. And close friends of mine have now contacted COVID-19, and it hurts. It actually hurts. So I'm just praying for everybody just to be safe. And to me, the best way to do that is to wear a mask when you're out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you for that comment, Darlene Barber Martinez. So I'll be attending a 3-day training session. This was recommended from the mayor, so thank you for that, Mayor. So I look forward to continuing my own growth as a council member. So I'll be attending the League's Council Members Executive Forum. It's going to be a virtual conference, June 18th, 25th, and July 2nd. So I'm looking forward to that. The follow-up meeting that Councilmember Darlene Barber Martinez mentioned for the groundwater basin will be tomorrow at 1:30 to 3 p.m. It's going to be via Zoom. And then also tomorrow will be the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance meeting at 5:30, also available through Zoom. It is open to the public, and if anybody would like to attend, please email me at luribe@riverbank.org, and I can send you over that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a lot that's going on in our world today, and with the death of George Floyd, it sparked a conversation and unrest that we haven't seen in over 5 decades, and it's not going to go away. I know that you've spoken about what we can do, and I believe it's a conversation that we need to have, because I believe this event is a catalyst for systemic change. And for our city, we need to have that very frank conversation. There's some things that I truly believe in the Black Lives Matters. There are some I do not understand about defunding, but I do need to understand that we have to separate those who are protesting with a great intention of social change to those who are using this forum for chaos and for personal gain. And I think, Sean, if you can have in our next meeting, allow us to talk about this as a council and as a community, because I believe it's extremely important to me, because I've been with this since the very early 60s. And I know everyone has their own opinions on it. And what we need to do is come up with a cohesive and manageable program to move forward. Sorry to hit you in the blind spot on that.
That's okay. That's easy. I'll put something together for council to discuss.
And I had other comments, but I don't believe that I really need to talk about anything except for the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities. We're truly trying to get those cities with 50,000 or above for this HEROES Act or HEROES legislation to receive funding directly. I was able to convince both the National League and the U.S. Conference of Mayors to include all cities, all communities, and it looks like it's going forward. Now, it has to be with the Senate to take up the action, and there are a lot that are discussing it. A $3 trillion bailout or $3 trillion supplement is not going to be the the outcome, but it's going to be something where it will be quite favorable for all cities at any level. So with that, I think that we're going to close and go into closed session. If you joined us on Zoom, you can raise your hand and feature or dial *9 on your phone to comment on closed session items. And you'll be given 3 minutes to talk total on the items that we're going into closed session. The first item is 8.1, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, property 3012 High Street, APN 132-003-022. Agency negotiator Sean Scully, City Manager. Property negotiator Virginia Jones. Property under negotiation, price, terms of payments for both. Item 8.2, conference with real property negotiators. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. Property APN 062-031-005 through 007. Agency negotiator Sean Scully, City Manager. Property negotiator Ametis Inc. Under negotiation, price, term of payment, or both. Item 8.3, liability claims. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.95, claimant Alcera Padilla Vega, claimant Ismael Martinez Jr., claimant Silas Mason Martinez, agency claim against the City of Riverbank. Annabelle, is there anyone wishing to speak on closed session matters?
Mayor, there is no one wishing to speak on this closed session matters, and there are no emails.
All right. The public portion of this meeting is now concluded. The City Council and LRA Board will be going into closed session. The report on the closed session items will be made to the City Clerk, which will be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. Anyone interested in receiving what was reported on the items may contact the City Clerk by calling 209-863-7198 or email cityclerk@riverbank.org. The next regular City Council meeting is on Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020 at 6 p.m. We are now adjourned to closed session. Good night.